In the harsh winter of 1880s Montana, fate weaves an unexpected tale of redemption. Silas McCrae, a widower haunted by loss, finds his world upended when he witnesses the unthinkable, a pregnant woman being auctioned like cattle in the town square. With his last dollars, he makes a bid that will change 2 lives forever. Eden Rose, 8 months along and carrying secrets as heavy as her burden, finds unlikely sanctuary on his struggling ranch. But as the snow deepens and danger draws near, what begins as an act of desperate kindness slowly transforms into something neither dared to hope for again. Between stalking enemies and suspicious townsfolk, they forge a bond deeper than mere survival. Could these 2 broken souls, brought together by cruel circumstance, find healing in each other's arms? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the Montana sky in shades of grief. Silas McCrae's weathered hands moved through the familiar motions of his morning routine, each gesture a reminder of what was missing. The leather cord around his neck carried Sarah's wedding ring, its weight both comfort and curse against his chest as he moved through the barn's shadows. The animals needed feeding, whether his heart was whole or not. 3 years had passed since the fever took Sarah, but some mornings, like this one, the loss felt fresh as yesterday's bread. He'd wake expecting to hear her humming from the kitchen, only to find silence and cold ashes in the hearth. Droughts. "I'm coming early this year," he muttered to his horse, Belle, who'd been Sarah's favorite. The mare's coat needed brushing, another task Sarah had always tended to. These days, everything about the ranch carried echoes of her absence. The farm ledger told a story as bitter as the morning coffee growing cold on his kitchen table. 3 bad seasons had whittled his savings down to dust, and the bank's patience was wearing thin as the topsoil. He needed supplies from town, feed for the animals, seeds for the spring planting, and that new plow blade he'd been putting off buying. But the numbers in the ledger mocked his plans, red ink bleeding across the pages like an open wound. Silas fingered the few dollar bills in his pocket, hard-earned from selling off the last of his father's prized cattle. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford, not if he wanted to keep his great-grandfather's ranch from becoming another ghost in these hills. The mirror above his wash basin reflected a stranger these days, a man of 45, whose dark hair had gone grey at the temples, whose eyes carried shadows deeper than any valley. Sarah used to tease him about his serious expression, saying he needed to smile more. "Your face'll freeze that way," she'd laugh, reaching up to smooth the worry lines from his brow. The memory caught him like a fist to the gut. Silas braced himself against the basin, letting the wave of grief pass through him like so many before. When he straightened, his jaw was set with familiar determination. He had to go to town. The ranch needed supplies, and dwelling on what couldn't be changed wouldn't fill his grain bins or fix his fences. As he hitched Belle to the wagon, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the frost-covered ground. Somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf called out to its mate. The answering silence spoke volumes to Silas, who knew too well how it felt to call out and hear nothing in return. He climbed onto the wagon seat, Sarah's ring a steady pressure against his heart. The 4-hour journey to town stretched before him like the years without her, long, lonely, and filled with the kind of quiet that made a man think too much about what he'd lost. The debtor's cell smelled of mildew and lost hopes. Eden Rose pressed her hand against her swollen belly, feeling the child within shift restlessly, as if sensing her despair. A torn letter lay crumpled in her lap, the elegant script of her father's hand now blurred with her tears. "You have brought shame upon this family. Do not attempt to return." 8 months pregnant and alone, she'd fled Boston's suffocating propriety for the promise of the West, carrying little more than her mother's silver locket and the weight of her secrets. The money she'd stolen from her father's safe had lasted barely 2 months. Now she found herself in a Montana Territory jail, awaiting auction like common property. "Sunrise tomorrow, Miss Rose." The jailer's voice carried neither cruelty nor kindness. "Judge says your debt's to be settled proper, according to territorial law." He paused, eyes flickering to her condition. "Might be someone'll show mercy, given your situation." Eden's fingers traced the embossed roses on her mother's locket, remembering the day she'd discovered Thomas's true nature. The wealthy banker's son had promised marriage, right until the moment she'd told him about the baby. His subsequent offer to handle the problem had sent her fleeing into the night, her mother's jewelry box hastily emptied into her reticule. The setting sun painted prison shadows across the rough wooden floor. Eden shifted on the hard bench, her back aching from weeks of poor sleep. The child within her kicked again, stronger this time, as if protesting their shared fate. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, running her palm over the swell of her belly. "We'll find a way." But her options had run dry as the winter wind. The boarding house owner had been kind at first, extending credit when Eden's funds dwindled, yet kindness had its limits, especially when confronted with mounting bills and a visibly pregnant, unmarried lodger. Yesterday's court hearing had been brief, the judgment swift. She would be auctioned off to cover her debts. Her labor contracted until the sum was paid. Eden pulled her thin shawl tighter, remembering different days, silk dresses and summer, gardens, her father's proud smile at society functions, her mother's gentle hands braiding her hair. That world had shattered like a mirror, leaving her to walk through the shards of her former life. The jailer's footsteps returned, accompanied by the scent of bland stew. "Eat up, Miss Rose. Tomorrow's a long day." He pushed the bowl through the cell bars with awkward gentleness. Eden accepted it with quiet dignity, the same dignity she'd maintained throughout the court proceedings, throughout every humiliation these past months had brought. As night settled over the small Montana town, Eden unfolded the letter one last time. Beyond her father's harsh words lay a deeper message. She was truly alone now, cut off from everything she'd ever known. Yet somehow, as she rested her head against the cold cell wall, she felt a strange sense of freedom. Tomorrow would bring what it brought, but she would face it on her own terms, protecting the precious life within her at any cost. The child moved again, a flutter beneath her heart. Eden hummed softly an old lullaby her mother had sung, its gentle melody at odds with the rough surroundings. Whatever happened at tomorrow's auction, she silently vowed, this child would know love. Even if that love came only from her, it would be enough. It had to be enough. The town square had drawn a crowd, despite the bitter morning chill. Silas stood at the back, his supply list forgotten in his pocket, as the auctioneer read from an official-looking document. The debt bond certificate caught the weak winter sunlight, its government seal a mockery of justice. By order of the territorial court, one Eden Rose, to cover debts totaling $78.45. The auctioneer's voice carried across the murmuring crowd. Labor contract to be fulfilled according to territorial law, term dependent on final bid price. They led her up onto the wooden platform. Silas's hands tightened on his wagon reins. The woman stood straight-backed, despite her obvious condition, her face composed even as winter wind whipped at her thin dress. Something in her bearing reminded him of Sarah in their early days, that same quiet dignity in the face of hardship. "Starting bid at $80, the auctioneer called out. "Includes room and board for the term of service." "60, someone shouted. Considering her condition, the woman, Eden, flinched almost imperceptibly. Her hands moved to protect her swollen belly, but her chin remained high. "65, called another voice. She looked strong enough for kitchen work. Silas recognized the voice. Tom Watson, who worked his servants until they broke. His wife had died last winter, and rumors suggested he was looking to replace her with someone more easily controlled. 70, and came another bid. Martin Drake, the saloon keeper. Silas had seen how his serving girls were treated. The woman's composure cracked just slightly. Fear flickered across her face, there and gone like lightning in summer clouds. Her hands trembled as they cradled her unborn child. "70's bid," the auctioneer droned. "Do I hear 75? Silas felt the weight of Sarah's ring against his chest. The money in his pocket was meant for supplies, for keeping his ranch alive through another season. He couldn't afford charity, not now, not with drought threatening and his own debts mounting. 70. "Going once?" Eden's eyes swept the crowd, landing briefly on Silas before moving on. In that moment he saw not a stranger but Sarah, as she'd looked in her final days, desperate, afraid, but fighting to the last. "Going twice. $100. Silas's voice surprised even himself, rough with disuse and emotion. The crowd parted, turning to stare at him. Eden's gaze found his again, something like hope warring with suspicion in her eyes. $100, the auctioneer repeated, suddenly more interested. "Do I hear 105? Silence fell over the square. Tom Watson spat in the dirt. Martin Drake shook his head. A serving girl wasn't worth that much. Even one as fine-looking as this. 100 going once, going twice. The gavel fell with terrible finality. "Sold to Silas McCrae." The clerk approached with the debt bond certificate, his pen scratching as he filled in Silas's name. The document's ornate border and official seals couldn't disguise what it really was. A collar and chain, wrapped in legal niceties. Silas, signed where indicated, his rough signature a stark contrast to the flowing script above. He handed over nearly every dollar he'd brought to town, watching as Eden was led down from the platform. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, though her eyes held the kind of wisdom that came only from hard lessons. "Mr. McCrae," she spoke for the first time, her voice cultured despite her circumstances. "Thank you," Silas nodded curtly, suddenly unsure of what he'd done. He had no plan for this, no way to explain to himself or anyone else why he'd just spent his last dollars on a pregnant stranger's debt bond. "My wagon's this way," he said gruffly, gesturing toward where Belle waited. "It's a long ride to the ranch." Eden gathered what dignity remained to her and followed him, her steps careful on the frozen ground. Behind them, the crowd dispersed, their morning's entertainment concluded. But Silas could feel their stares, hear the whispers already starting. What kind of man bought a pregnant woman's debt bond? What kind of woman ended up on that auction block? The questions would follow them home like shadows. But Silas had learned long ago not to care what town gossips thought. He had enough troubles, without adding their opinions to his burden. The wagon creaked beneath them, each turn of its worn wheels marking another mile of silence. Eden sat perched at the edge of the seat, maintaining a careful distance from the stranger who'd just purchased her debt. The broken wagon wheel they'd passed an hour back stood in her mind as an omen, a reminder of how easily things could splinter apart on these untamed roads. "Storms coming." Silas's voice was rough from disuse, his eyes on the darkening horizon. "Might have to stop at Miller's Way station if it hits before sundown." Eden nodded, watching clouds gather like bruises across the sky. Her back ached from the rigid posture she'd maintained, but pride wouldn't let her show weakness. "How much further to your ranch, Mr. McCrae?" 3 hours, weather permitting. He glanced at her briefly. "There's water in the canteen behind you if you're thirsty." The silence settled again, broken only by Belle's steady hoofbeats and the increasing wind. Eden's hands moved restlessly over her belly, soothing the child within. After a while, she felt Silas watching her from the corner of his eye. "How far along?" he asked, voice gentler than before. 8 months, or near enough. She hesitated, then added, "The baby's strong. Active." Silas nodded, something flickering across his weathered features. "My wife." He stopped, cleared his throat. "Sarah knew her way around birthing, helped half the county's babies into the world before the fever took her." The words hung between them like frost. Eden absorbed their meaning. Not just a widower, but a man who'd watched his wife aid new life even as her own slipped away. It explained something of why he'd stepped forward at the auction. The first fat drops of rain began to fall. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop, reaching behind the seat for an oilskin tarp. "Here," he said, arranging it over her shoulders. "Sarah's old rain gear. Keep you dry." Eden wrapped herself in the tarp, catching a faint scent of lavender, a gentle ghost of the woman who'd worn it before. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the covering. They continued on as the storm grew fiercer. The wagon rocked over increasingly treacherous ground, each jolt sending waves of discomfort through Eden's tired body. She tried to brace herself, but a particularly hard bump drew an involuntary gasp. Without comment, Silas shifted the reins to one hand and offered his arm. "Lean here," he said gruffly. "Better support." Pride warred with necessity. Another jolt decided her. Eden gripped his arm, feeling solid muscle beneath his worn coat. They rode that way for the next hour, neither speaking of the arrangement. The rain eventually slackened, revealing a landscape transformed. Mud stretched endlessly in every direction, and the wheel tracks behind them filled with water almost as soon as they were made. Eden found herself studying her companion's profile, noting the grey at his temples, the deep lines around his eyes that spoke of both worry and laughter. "Your ranch," she ventured finally. "What sort is it?" "Mixed farming. Cattle, mostly, though. The herd's smaller now. Some crops." He paused. "Was my great-grandfather's land. Built it up from nothing." Something in his tone suggested he feared watching it return to nothing. Eden nodded, understanding debt's heavy weight all too well. "I know something of farming," she offered. Before everything, we had an estate in Massachusetts. I used to help in the kitchen gardens." Silas's lips twitched slightly. "Kitchen gardens ain't quite the same as ranch work." "No," she agreed, surprising herself with a small smile. "I suppose not, but I'm willing to learn." The way station appeared, ahead, a solid shadow against the stormy sky. Silas guided the wagon toward it, both of them knowing they'd have to wait out the worst of the weather. As they pulled to a stop, Eden felt the child kick strongly. "Mr. McCrae," she said softly, still holding his arm, "I don't know what made you offer that bid today, but I want you to know, whatever work you require, whatever I can do to repay the debt, I will." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and careful. "Get some rest, Miss Rose. We've still got a long road ahead." They both knew he meant more than just the journey to the ranch. Eden found the shawl in the back bedroom, her first morning at the ranch. It lay folded in a cedar chest, soft wool the color of autumn leaves, a few dark hairs still clinging to its weave. Sarah's shawl. Her fingers hesitated over it, feeling like an intruder in the dead woman's domain. "You can use it." Silas's voice from the doorway made her start. "Winters here bite deep. Sarah would have—" He cleared his throat. "She wouldn't want it going to waste." The shawl settled around Eden's shoulders like a blessing, warming more than just her body. She followed Silas to the kitchen where the morning's tasks awaited. The routine of ranch life began establishing itself, each of them finding their way around the other like careful dancers. Silas showed her the essentials: where to find eggs in the hen house, how to work the temperamental pump that brought up well water, which floorboards creaked and which held firm. He spoke little, but his instructions were clear and patient, his manner respectful despite their strange circumstances. Eden learned quickly that ranch mornings waited for no one. Her first attempt at feeding chickens scattered grain everywhere, drawing a rare chuckle from Silas. "You're throwing a party, not serving breakfast," he said, demonstrating the proper technique. "Gentle, like this." She mastered the rhythm of it by the second day, just as she learned to gauge the wood stove's temperament. Her first biscuits came out black as coal, but Silas ate them without complaint. The second batch turned out better, earning her a nod. That felt like high praise. They established boundaries without discussion. Silas took his meals at the kitchen table, but retreated to the barn or fields immediately after. Eden kept to the house and immediate yard, respecting his space while creating her own. The shared silences grew more comfortable, like well-worn boots breaking in. One evening Eden was kneading dough when she felt the baby shift sharply. A bowl clattered to the floor, breaking the quiet. Silas appeared in the doorway instantly, concern evident beneath his usual reserve. "Just startled me," she assured him, one hand on her belly. "The little one's getting stronger." Silas nodded, then surprised her by saying, "Sarah used to sing, said babies could hear it even before they came." He turned away quickly, but not before Eden caught the flash of pain in his eyes. That night, Eden hummed softly as she worked, old lullabies her mother had taught her. If Silas heard from his place by the fire, he gave no sign, but the tight set of his shoulders seemed to ease. Days fell into pattern. Eden found herself watching Silas through the window as he worked the fields, his strength and capability evident in every movement. Sometimes she caught him watching her too, when he thought she wouldn't notice, checking on her well-being, she suspected, rather than monitoring her work. The shawl became her constant companion as autumn's chill deepened. One morning she found a pile of Sarah's old dresses in her room, modified for her changing shape. Silas said nothing about them, but Eden recognized the careful stitching as man's work, done by hands more accustomed to mending harnesses than hemlines. They were finding their way, slow but steady as the sunrise. Eden learned to read Silas's moods in small things. The set of his jaw, the rhythm of his bootsteps, the way he held his coffee cup. He, in turn, seemed to sense when her back ached too much for heavy chores, quietly handling the more strenuous tasks without comment. "You're doing fine," he said gruffly one evening after she'd managed a full day's work without dropping a single dish or burning a single meal. The praise warmed her more than she cared to admit. That night, Eden sat in Sarah's old rocking chair, wrapped in Sarah's shawl, feeling the ghost of another woman's life surrounding her. Not replacing, she thought, but building something new from the foundations of what was lost. Like the ranch itself, weathered but standing, making room for new growth among the old roots. The baby kicked, a strong flutter under her heart. From his place by the fire, Silas looked up at her small gasp, then back to his paper, but his presence felt protective rather than distant, and Eden found herself humming again, letting the melody fill the comfortable silence between them. The family Bible lay open on the kitchen table, its pages yellowed with age and memory. Eden's fingers traced the careful script recording births, deaths, and marriages of the McCrae clan. Sarah's death was the last entry, written in a shaking hand that spoke volumes about Silas's grief. Soon, Eden knew another name would join these pages, her child's, though she wasn't sure if it would truly belong among this family's history. "First snow's coming," Silas announced, stamping his boots clean as he entered. "Need to bring in the last of the root vegetables before the ground freezes." He paused, seeing the Bible. Something flickered across his face. Not anger at her presumption, but a softer emotion she couldn't quite name. "Your family's been on this land a long time," Eden said quietly, turning to the first page of records. 5 generations. Silas moved closer, his presence warm in the cool kitchen. "Great-grandfather William McCrae broke ground here in 1799. Said the valley spoke to him, told him this was where he belonged." Eden nodded, understanding the pull of place. Her own family's Boston mansion had never spoken to her the way this ranch did, with its honest work and quiet dignity. "The garden's ready for winter," she offered. "I've stored everything according to your instructions. You've done good work." His praise, though sparse, was always sincere. "How's the little one today?" "Active. I think she knows the weather's changing." Eden had started thinking of the baby as a girl, though she kept that notion mostly to herself. Silas's hand moved, almost touching her shoulder before dropping away. Sarah always said babies could sense such things. He'd begun speaking of Sarah, more easily now, the memories bringing warmth instead of just pain. "We should check the root cellar, make sure it's properly sealed." They worked together through the afternoon, their movements synchronized by weeks of shared tasks. Eden counted preserved jars while Silas checked the cellar's wooden supports. The baby kicked regularly, as if participating in the inventory. 82 jars of preserves, Eden reported, plus the dried meat and vegetables. She didn't mention how she'd learned to can from watching her families cook, those skills now proving more valuable than any society accomplishment. Should see us through, Silas nodded, unless the winter runs long. He hesitated, then added, "You'll need more warm things, for after." They both knew he meant after the baby came. Eden's hands went instinctively to her belly. "I've been altering some of Sarah's old things," she said carefully. If that's all right." "It's all right." His voice was gruff but gentle. "She'd have wanted them used." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small. "Found this while checking the storage trunk. Thought you might want it, for the little one." It was a tiny silver rattle, clearly old but well preserved. "Sarah's mother brought it from Scotland," he explained. "All the McCrae babies have used it." Eden's fingers closed around the rattle, feeling its weight. Not just silver, but history and acceptance. "Thank you," she whispered, emotion making. Her voice thick. That evening, as the first snowflakes began to fall, they sat in their accustomed places, Silas by the fire with his ledgers, Eden in the rocking chair with her mending. The Bible remained on the table between them, a bridge between past and future. "The town's starting to talk," Silas said suddenly, breaking their comfortable silence. "About your situation. About us." Eden's hands stilled on her sewing. "Does it trouble you?" "Trouble's not the word." He stared into the fire. "But you should know. Reverend Matthews has been asking questions about your welfare, about propriety." The word hung in the air like frost. Eden understood its implications. An unmarried woman, heavy with child, living under a widower's roof. Even her debt bond couldn't entirely quiet the gossip. "I can handle gossip," she said firmly, unless you'd prefer I find other arrangements." "No." The word came quickly, surprising them both. Silas cleared his throat. "That is, you've made a place here. The ranch runs better with you in it. And when the baby comes..." He trailed off, emotions warring on his weathered face. Eden felt the child move, as if responding to the tension in the room. Outside, the snow fell harder, wrapping the ranch in white silence. Inside, something shifted between them. Subtle as a changing wind, profound as a season's turning. "We'll weather it," she said softly, not sure if she meant the winter, the gossip, or this delicate thing growing between them. "Together." Silas nodded, turning back to his ledgers. But Eden saw how his eyes lingered on the Bible, on the empty space, waiting for new names, new stories, new beginnings. The threatening note appeared on a Tuesday, tucked beneath their door like a serpent in the grass. Eden found it while sweeping, her heart stopping at the familiar handwriting. "Your father sends his regards. Time to come home, dear sister. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. James." Her hands trembled as she read it again. James, her older brother, the perfect heir to their father's banking empire. She'd hoped the vastness of the frontier would hide her trail, but money could buy many eyes. "Eden?" Silas's voice from the doorway made her start. He must have read something in her face, because he crossed the room in 3 long strides. "What is it?" She handed him the note wordlessly, watching as his expression hardened. "Your family?" "My brother." Eden sank into a kitchen chair, one hand protectively over her belly. "He's father's attack dog when things need handling." Silas set the note on the table between them, its elegant paper incongruous against the worn wood. "What kind of handling?" "The kind that makes problems disappear." Eden's voice was bitter. "When I refused to rid myself of the baby, father said he'd handle it himself. That's why I ran." A muscle ticked in Silas's jaw. "They mean to take you back? They mean to take the child." The words tasted like ashes. "A foundling home back east. Very discreet, very expensive. No one need ever know the shame I've brought. To the family name." Silas's hand came down hard on the table, making her jump. "That's not happening." The fierce protectiveness in his voice brought unexpected tears to Eden's eyes. You don't understand. James has resources, connections. He'll find a way to nullify the debt bond, claim I'm mentally unfit, anything to get what father wants. This is my land. Silas's voice was quiet, but iron hard. My home. Nobody takes what's mine without a fight. What's mine? The words hung. In the air between them, heavy with meaning, neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Before Eden could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Stay here, Silas ordered, moving to the window. His shoulders tensed. 3 riders. Well-dressed. Eden's heart clenched. James never travels alone. Then he's about to learn how we handle things in Montana. Silas checked his rifle, then met her eyes. This is your home too, Eden. If you want it to be, your choice. The baby kicked, strong and determined. Eden straightened in her chair, feeling steel enter her spine. I choose here. I choose us, she didn't say, but Silas seemed to hear it anyway. He nodded once, then stepped onto the porch to meet their visitors. Eden moved to the window, watching. As James dismounted, elegant even in trail dust, their father's arrogance in every line of his face. Mr. McCrae. James's voice carried clearly. I've come for my sister. Miss Rose is under contract to this ranch. Silas's stance was casual, but Eden recognized the coiled tension in his frame. Legal and binding, James smiled thinly. Contracts can be broken, especially, he pulled out papers from his coat, when the signatory is found to be mentally compromised by her condition. I have documents from 3 Boston physicians attesting to her instability. Eastern papers don't mean much out here. Silas hadn't moved, but something dangerous had entered his voice. And a man coming onto my land, threatening what's mine, that means even less. One of James's companions shifted, his coat revealing a holstered pistol. Eden's breath caught, but Silas merely smiled, cold as mountain frost. Your men draw those guns. They won't leave this valley standing. His tone made it a simple statement of fact. Your choice. James's facade cracked slightly. He wasn't used to being opposed, especially not by frontier ranchers. This isn't over, Mr. McCrae. The child my sister carries has Blackwood blood. Our father won't allow his grandchild to be raised in these conditions. Your father gave up any claim when he cast her out. Silas took one step forward, and despite being unarmed, something in his presence made James step back. This is your only warning. Leave my ranch. Leave my family alone. My family. Eden's hand pressed against the window glass, tears blurring. Her vision, as she watched James and his men mount up, their retreat as dignified as they could manage under Silas's unwavering stare. When they'd gone, Silas returned inside. Eden met him halfway across the kitchen, words tumbling out. They'll be back. James never gives up once father sets him on a course. Let them come. Silas's hand found hers, rough palm against smooth fingers. We'll be ready. The threatening note still lay on the table, but it seemed to have lost its power. Eden looked at their joined hands, feeling the strength and promise in that simple touch. We, she repeated softly. Yes, we will. The old ranch map had yellowed with age, its corners soft from generations of handling. Silas spread it across the kitchen table, his finger tracing the faded line that marked the hidden storm cellar. Great-grandfather dug it himself, he explained, voice tight with urgency. Built it deep with room for emergency supplies. We need to move now, before this storm gets worse. Eden stood at the window, watching darkness gather like a predator across the afternoon sky. The temperature had dropped 30 degrees since morning, and the wind carried ice instead of snow. Even the animals had gone quiet, sensing the danger. Approaching. How bad? She asked, one hand resting on her heavily pregnant belly. Worst I've seen in 15 years. Silas was already gathering supplies. Lanterns, blankets, preserved food, the kind that can kill if you're not prepared. A massive gust rattled the windows, making them both jump. Eden felt the baby shift restlessly, responding to her tension. The animals already moved them to the reinforced barn. They'll huddle together, stay warm. He paused in his preparations, studying her. Can you make it to the cellar? It's about 50 yards, but we'll be fighting the wind. Eden nodded, wrapping Sarah's old shawl more tightly around her shoulders. I can make it. They stepped out into chaos. The wind hit like a physical blow, driving needles of ice into any exposed skin. Silas's arm went around Eden's waist, supporting her as they struggled toward the barely visible cellar doors. She could feel his strength, his determination to keep her safe in every step. The cellar entrance protested with a screech of rusty hinges. Silas helped Eden down the steep stairs, then secured the doors above them with a heavy wooden bar. The sound of the storm became muffled, distant, though they could still feel its rage in the way the ground seemed to tremble. Let me get the lanterns lit, Silas said, his voice echoing slightly in the underground space. Light bloomed, revealing a room larger than Eden had expected. Rough-hewn walls held shelves of supplies, and a small wooden platform in one corner held what looked like emergency bedding. Your great-grandfather thought of everything, Eden observed, easing herself onto a sturdy chair. He lost his first wife to a storm like this. Silas busied himself arranging their supplies, but his voice carried the weight of family history. Built this place so it would never happen again. Sarah used to... He stopped, then continued more softly. Sarah used to say he loved so deeply he changed the land itself to protect what was his. The baby kicked sharply, making Eden gasp. Silas was at her side instantly, concern evident in every line of his face. What is it? Is it time? No, she assured him, taking his hand and placing it where the child moved. Just restless, like the storm above. His palm was warm against her belly, and neither of them moved for a long moment. The baby kicked again, and Eden saw something raw and wonderful flash across Silas's features. Strong, he murmured, like its mother. Heat that had nothing to do with her shawl spread through Eden's chest. I'm not strong, she whispered. I ran away. I hid. You ran to protect your child. His hand remained where it was, thumb moving in small, unconscious circles. Chose a hard path instead of an easy wrong. That's strength, Eden. Above them, the storm howled its fury. Down here, time seemed to move differently, measured in heartbeats and shared breaths. Eden found herself studying Silas's face in the lantern light, seeing not just the grief-hardened widower who'd bought her contract, but a man capable of extraordinary gentleness. I never thanked you properly, she said softly, for what you did that day at the auction, for everything since. No thanks needed. His voice was gruff, but his hand stayed gentle on her belly. You've brought life back to this place, to more than just the ranch. The confession hung in the air between them, too honest to take back, too fragile to acknowledge directly. The baby kicked again, as if punctuating the moment, and they both smiled. Hours passed in the cellar's close quarters. They shared a simple meal of preserved food, talked quietly of small things, ranch work, childhood memories, hopes for the spring planting. The storm raged on, but down here they'd found a different kind of shelter. Eden dozed eventually, exhausted by pregnancy and emotion. She woke briefly to find herself carefully arranged on the emergency bedding, Silas's coat added to her blankets, his solid presence keeping watch from the chair nearby. Sleep, he said softly, catching her half-opened eyes. I'll be here. She drifted off again, feeling safer than she had since leaving Boston. The storm could tear the world apart above them, but here, in this underground sanctuary, something new and precious was taking root, like seeds waiting out the winter, gathering strength for spring. The church notice board bore the announcement like an accusation. Special sermon on Christian marriage and proper household relations. Below, in smaller text, those living in irregular circumstances are especially encouraged to attend. Eden stood before it, conscious of the whispers behind her as townswomen gathered for their weekly sewing circle. Subtle as a bull in a china shop, our Reverend Matthews, Mrs. Miller said, appearing at Eden's elbow. The older woman had been one of the few to show kindness since Eden's arrival, occasionally sharing pregnancy advice and spare preserves. Though he means well in his way, Eden's hands smoothed her dress over her prominent belly. 8.5 months gone now, the child could arrive any day. Does he? Sometimes I wonder if concern for propriety outweighs concern for actual people. That's the town's way. Mrs. Miller's voice held understanding. They mean no real harm, but they like things neat and orderly, a widow and widower living together that they could understand, even overlook certain arrangements. But your situation is complicated, Eden finished. She gathered her courage and turned to face the older woman directly. Mrs. Miller, you've been kind to me. Tell me truly, what are they saying? The older woman sighed. That Silas McCrae's being taken advantage of by a clever girl with a sub-story. That your brother's visit proved you're more than you seem. That the child might have a claim on the ranch someday. She paused. And that's just what they're saying in polite company. Eden's chest tightened. She'd known there would be talk, but hearing it laid bare still hurt. And what do you think? I think I've seen how that man looks at you when you're not watching. Mrs. Miller's eyes were kind but knowing. And how you look at him, the rest is just details waiting to be sorted. Before Eden could respond, Reverend Matthews emerged from the church, his expression brightening at the sight of her. Miss Rose, I was hoping to speak with you. Mrs. Miller squeezed Eden's arm and melted away, leaving her to face the preacher alone. He was a younger man than many expected for such a remote posting, earnest in his convictions, if sometimes overzealous in their application. Reverend, Eden acknowledged, keeping her tone neutral, I trust you saw the notice. He gestured to the board. I've been meaning to speak with you and Mr. McCrae about your situation. The town has concerns. The town seems to have many concerns these days. They worry for your welfare, for the child's future. He shifted uncomfortably. There are rumors about your family back east, about why you left. My reasons are my own, Eden cut in, sharper than she intended. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. Of course. The Reverend held up placating hands. But surely you... See how your current living arrangement appears. Mr. McCrae is a respected member of this community, despite his recent difficulties. And you're a woman of obviously gentle breeding, despite your circumstances. There are proper ways to handle such situations. Proper ways? Eden's voice was quiet but steel-edged, like sending me back to my family, or perhaps to one of those discreet homes for unfortunate women. The Reverend had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was thinking more of marriage, actually. The word hung in the air between them. Eden's heart skipped, then steadied. Marriage should be more than a solution to a problem, Reverend. Should it, I wonder? His gaze was shrewd. I've seen how he watches over you, how you've brought life back to that ranch and to him. Sometimes God's greatest gifts come disguised as problems to be solved. Eden opened her mouth to respond. But a familiar wagon's approach interrupted them. Silas pulled up beside the church, his expression carefully neutral as he took in the scene. Miss Rose, he said, climbing down. Reverend, Mr. McCrae. The preacher brightened. We were just discussing. I'm sure you were. Silas's tone could have frozen water. He turned to Eden. Ready to head back? She nodded, grateful for the escape, but the Reverend wasn't finished. Think on what I said, he called as Silas helped her into the wagon. Both of you. My door is always open, and I keep the necessary licenses on hand. The ride home was quiet, thick with unspoken words. Finally, as the ranch came into view, Silas spoke. What did he want? To solve a problem. Eden's hand rested on her belly. To make things proper. Silas's knuckles whitened on the reins. And what do you think about proper? Eden thought of Mrs. Miller's knowing look, of the Reverend's shrewd observations, of all the quiet moments she and Silas had shared. I think, she said carefully, that proper isn't always the same as right. He nodded slowly, understanding all she wasn't saying. We'll figure it out, Eden. Whatever comes. She believed him. But as they approached the ranch, she couldn't help. wondering if sometimes the proper thing and the right thing might turn out to be the same after all. The locket slipped from Eden's trembling fingers, falling open as it hit the wooden floor. Inside, the tiny portrait revealed what she'd tried so hard to hide, her family standing proud before their Boston mansion, her father's banking empire evident in every fine detail. But it was the newspaper clipping tucked behind the picture that made Silas's breath catch as he picked it up. "Blackwood banking empire expands west," he read slowly, his voice growing harder with each word. "Thomas Blackwood, Jr., son of banking. Magnate Harrison Blackwood announces new frontier investments." He looked up, understanding dawning in his eyes. The banker's son, the baby's father. Eden stood by the window, arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "Now you know. I'm not just some unfortunate girl from a good family. I'm a Blackwood." The name tasted bitter on her tongue. "Daughter of the man buying up failing ranches across the territory. The same man who's been pressuring every ranch in the valley to sell." Silas's voice was dangerously quiet. "The man whose son, Thomas and I were to be married. A perfect merger of family interests." Eden's laugh held no humor. "Until I told him about the baby, then suddenly marriage wasn't part of his plans." Silas set the locket on the table with exaggerated care, as if afraid he might crush it. "And your father?" "Offered to handle the embarrassment. He has connections with certain private homes that make inconvenient problems disappear." Her hand pressed against her child, feeling its strong movements. "When I refused, he gave me a choice: get rid of the baby or be cut off without a penny. So you ran. So I ran. Took my mother's jewelry, what cash I could gather." Eden forced herself to meet his eyes, seeing the storm of emotions there. "I never meant to hide the truth from you. At first I was afraid. Then after a while, I wanted you to see me, just me. Not a Blackwood, not a banker's daughter, just Eden." Her voice broke slightly. "The woman who's been learning to gather eggs without getting pecked. Who finally managed to make decent biscuits. Who's brought life back to this place." Silas finished softly, echoing his words from the storm cellar. Hope flickered in Eden's chest, but she had to be honest. "There's more. The investments Thomas announced, they're part of Father's plan to control water rights throughout the territory. This valley, your ranch, they're all part of his expansion." Silas absorbed this, his face unreadable. "And you? Are you part of his plan too?" "No!" The denial burst from her. "Everything I told you about running, about protecting my baby, that was all true, I swear it." He studied her for a long moment, seeing perhaps how her hands shook, how she struggled to stand proud despite her fear. Finally he spoke. "I believe you." Eden sagged with relief. But Silas wasn't finished. "Your father, he's the one who's been buying up the mortgages, moving them to his bank." She nodded miserably. "He calls it consolidating interests. Once he controls the debts, he can force sales. The droughts made it easier. So many ranches struggling, like mine." Silas's voice was flat. "I didn't know. Not at first." Eden took a step toward him, needing him to understand. "When I realized, I started helping with the books, trying to find ways to make things better. Not because of Father, but because this place, you..." She stopped, unable to find words for everything the ranch and its owner had come to mean to her. Silas's expression softened slightly. "I know. I've seen how hard you work, how much you care." He paused. "But Eden, your father won't stop. Men like him, they don't let anything stand in their way. Not ranches, not rivers, not daughters." Her smile was sad. "No, he doesn't. But I'm not his daughter anymore. I made my choice the day I ran, and I'd make it again." She straightened, finding strength in the truth. "I chose my child. I choose this life, this place, if you'll still have me knowing everything." The silence stretched between them, heavy with decisions. Outside, a winter wind rattled the windows, reminding them of approaching storms, both natural and man-made. Finally, Silas moved, closing the distance between them. His hand came up to touch her cheek, rough palm against soft skin. "The ranch needs you," he said gruffly. "Both of you." Eden heard what he wasn't saying, what perhaps he wasn't ready to say. She covered his hand with hers, feeling the calluses earned from honest work. "Then we'll fight him together. All of us." The locket lay forgotten on the table, its secrets exposed, but losing their power in the light of truth. Eden felt her child move, strong and sure, and knew that sometimes running away could lead you straight home. The blank marriage license lay between them on the kitchen table, Reverend Matthew's careful copperplate script waiting for their names. Eden traced the document's ornate border with her fingertip, remembering different papers, contracts, debt bonds, banknotes that had shaped her life these past months. "We don't have to do this," Silas said quietly. He stood by the window watching snow gather in the yard. "There might be other ways." "Are there?" Eden shifted in her chair, the baby particularly active tonight. "My father's bank now holds your mortgage. James is spreading rumors in town about my mental state. And the reverends made it clear the community's patience with our arrangement is wearing thin. Damn the community's patience." But there was more resignation than heat in his voice. "And damn your father's schemes. Marriage would protect the baby," Eden said softly. "Give me legal standing to refuse any claims my family might make. And with a wife's property rights." She stopped, seeing him tense. "Is that all it would be?" Silas turned from the window, his face shadowed. "Legal protection? Property rights?" Eden met his gaze steadily. "You know it wouldn't." The confession hung in the air between them, too honest to take back, too important to ignore. Silas moved to the table, pulling out the chair next to her. His hands, rough from work but capable of such gentleness, rested near the license without touching it. "When Sarah died," he began slowly, "I thought that part of my life was over. The part where you share meals and work and quiet evenings. The part where someone knows your thoughts before you speak them." He paused. "The part where your heart beats in time with another's." Eden's own heart thundered in her chest. "And now I find myself watching you gather eggs in the morning light, looking for you in every room I enter, hearing your humming, even when you're not there." His voice roughened. "It's not the same as it was with Sarah. Couldn't be. Shouldn't be. But it's real," Eden finished when he struggled for words. "True, yes." He met her eyes. "Too real to cheapen with a marriage of convenience. Too true to use as just a shield against your father's ambitions." Eden reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "Then let it be more. Let it be what it's becoming anyway. What we both feel, but haven't dared to name." Silas turned, his hand beneath hers, fingers intertwining. "You deserve better than a struggling rancher with more debts than prospects. I deserve a man who bid his last dollars to save a stranger, who's shown me nothing but respect and kindness, who looks at me like," she smiled softly, "like you're looking at me now." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks dancing. Outside, the snow fell harder, but in the kitchen's warmth something else was falling. Walls built of grief and fear, of past hurts and present doubts. "It won't be easy," Silas warned. "Your father won't stop just because we marry, might make him fight harder. Then we'll fight harder too." Eden's free hand rested on her belly, feeling their child's strong movements. "This little one's already proved stubborn, must run in the family." That drew a rare chuckle from him. "Both families, I'd say." He sobered quickly, though, thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Eden, if we do this, if we marry, it has to be real. Not just on paper, not just for show. I won't offer less than everything I am. Everything you are is exactly what I want." The words came easily, naturally, carrying the weight of months of growing feelings. The ranch, the struggles, the quiet. Moments, all of it. "I choose this life, Silas, I choose you." He stood then, still holding her hand, and helped her to her feet. In the firelight, his eyes held warmth she'd once thought permanently extinguished by grief. "Then I suppose we should tell Reverend Matthews to ready the church." Eden stepped closer, drawn by the gravity of the moment, of their shared future taking shape. "Is that your way of proposing, Mr. McCrae?" His free hand came up to cup her cheek, work-roughened palm gentle against her skin. "No, this is." The kiss, when it came, felt like coming home, like spring after winter, like dawn after darkness, like hope taking root and blooming wild and free. The simple gold band caught the winter morning light, its well-worn surface telling stories of love, both past and present. Sarah's mother's ring, 3 generations of McCrae brides had worn it before, each adding their own chapter to its history. Now it waited in Silas's pocket, heavy with meaning and memory. The church stood quiet, frost painting delicate patterns on its windows. Only a handful of witnesses gathered in the pews. Mrs. Miller, beaming like a proud aunt, the Hansons from the neighboring ranch, Doc Williams and his wife, a few others who'd shown kindness during Eden's months in the valley. Reverend Matthews had suggested a larger ceremony, to quiet any talk, he'd said. But Eden and Silas had chosen this instead, a morning wedding, simple and true as the love that had grown between them. Eden wore Sarah's best dress, carefully altered to accommodate her advanced pregnancy. The dark blue wool suited her, Silas thought, watching her move down the short aisle. No fancy Eastern silks, no banker's daughter finery, just a strong woman who'd chosen this life, this love, this future. The baby was active this morning, making Eden's steps careful but determined. She carried a small bouquet of dried flowers Mrs. Miller had contributed, lavender and wheat stalks, prairie roses preserved from summer. Around her neck she wore Sarah's cross, another piece of McCrae history embracing her. "Nervous," Silas whispered as she reached his side. Eden's smile was radiant. "No. For the first time in months, I'm absolutely certain." The ceremony itself was brief, the Reverend keeping to the essential words that would bind them together. When he spoke of facing life's storms together, Silas and Eden shared a private look, remembering the cellar where something deeper than survival had taken root. "The ring," Reverend Matthews prompted. Silas drew out the gold band, its weight familiar. In his palm, he'd spent hours with it the night before, thinking of Sarah, of endings and beginnings, of love's capacity to grow even in grief's shadow. "This ring," he said quietly, taking Eden's hand, "has seen hard times and good, drought years and plenty, joy and sorrow. Like this ranch, like this life we're choosing, it's not perfect, but it's real, true." His voice roughened. "Like what I feel for you." Tears brightened Eden's eyes as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been waiting for her all along. "I never thought I'd find this," she answered, her free hand resting where their child moved beneath her heart. "A home, a love that doesn't need pretense or polish. Just you, this land, this life we're building." Mrs. Miller sniffled audibly. From her pew, Doc Williams cleared his throat. Even Reverend Matthews seemed moved by the simple honesty of their words. "By the authority vested in me," he pronounced, "I now declare you husband and wife. What God and this good land have joined, together let no man put asunder." Their first kiss as married couple was gentle, reverent, full of promises. The small congregation burst into warm applause, their approval feeling like a blessing. The celebration afterward was as simple as the ceremony. Coffee and Mrs. Miller's best spice cake in the church basement. Eden sat beside Silas, their shoulders touching, both of them somewhat amazed at how natural it felt, this new closeness. "Congratulations, Mrs. McCrae," Doc Williams said, using her new name for the first time. "Though I expect I'll be seeing you professionally quite soon." He winked, patting his medical bag. Eden's hand found Silas's under the table. "We'll be ready." The winter morning lengthened into afternoon. Finally, it was time to head home, home now truly shared between them. Silas helped Eden into their wagon, tucking blankets around her against the cold. As they drove away from the church, Eden twisted the gold band on her finger, watching it catch the light. "Happy?" Silas asked softly. "More than." She leaned against his shoulder, fitting there as naturally as the ring on her hand. "Though you realize this means you're stuck with two Blackwoods stubborn folks now." His laugh was warm and free, the sound of a heart fully awakened. "Reckon the ranch could use some of that stubbornness, especially with your father still to face." "We'll face him together." Eden's voice held absolute certainty. "All three of us." The ring glinted in the winter sun, adding their story to its generations of memories. Ahead, the ranch waited, changed. Now, no longer a place of echoing loss, but of new beginnings, of love chosen and fought for, of family being born from the ashes of what was lost. The hand-carved cradle stood unfinished in Silas's workshop, its half-completed form catching moonlight through the window. He'd been working on it in secret, stealing moments between ranch duties to shape the wood, wanting to surprise Eden. Now, as her screams echoed through the house, the cradle's emptiness seemed an accusation. Too soon. It was all happening too soon. "Silas," Mrs. Miller's voice carried from the bedroom, "we need more hot water, and send word to Doc Williams." His hands shook as he pumped water into the kettle. 8 months along, the baby wasn't supposed to come for weeks yet, but the winter storm that had blown in that afternoon had brought more than just snow. It had brought labor pains that left Eden white-faced and gasping. "Hold on," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "Just hold on." The nearest neighbor boy was already riding for the doctor, but in this weather there was no telling how long it would take. Silas carried the hot water upstairs, his heart clenching at Eden's obvious distress. She lay in their bed, after just 3 weeks of marriage. Her face sheened with sweat, despite the room's chill. "Silas," she reached for him, fear evident in her eyes. "It's too early." "Hush now." He took her hand, amazed as always by how perfectly it fit in his. "You're stronger than you know. Both of you are." Mrs. Miller worked efficiently, her experienced hands checking Eden's condition. Her frown deepened. "Baby's not turned right," she said quietly. "We need the doctor." Another contraction seized Eden, drawing a cry that tore at Silas's soul. He'd heard that sound before. Sarah, in the grip of fever, calling for help, couldn't give. The memory threatened to paralyze him. "Silas McCrae." Mrs. Miller's sharp voice snapped him back. "This isn't then. This is now, and your wife needs you." He nodded, forcing the past back where it belonged. Eden's hand tightened on his as another pain took her. "Tell me a story," she gasped. "Anything. Just help me focus on something else." Silas perched carefully on the bed's edge, maintaining his grip on her hand. "Did I ever tell you about the cradle? The one I've been making?" Her eyes found his, latching onto the distraction. "It's cherry wood, like the one my father made for me. Been working on it between chores. Wanted to surprise you." He described each detail, the gentle curve of the rockers, the careful joinery that would last generations, the subtle carvings of prairie roses along the headboard. Eden held his gaze, breathing through her pain, letting his voice anchor her. Hours passed. The storm intensified, window panes rattling in protest. Mrs. Miller did what she could, but her worried glances told Silas all he needed to know. Without the doctor, Silas. Eden's voice was weaker now. "Promise me. Promise me you'll take care of—" "Don't!" He cut her off, voice fierce. "Don't you dare say goodbye. You're not leaving me, either of you." A sound at the door. Doc Williams, snow-covered but blessedly present, his medical bag already open. "Let's see what we have here," he said calmly, moving to examine Eden. What followed was a blur of activity. The doctor's quiet instructions, Mrs. Miller's efficient assistance, Eden's determination as she fought to bring their child into the world. Silas found himself praying, something he hadn't done since Sarah's death. Not elaborate prayers, just one word repeated: "Please, please, please." Dawn was breaking when the baby's first cry split the air, strong and indignant, a fighter's cry. "A girl," Doc Williams announced, quickly checking the tiny form. "Small but healthy." Silas felt tears on his cheeks as they laid his daughter in Eden's arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when she briefly opened them, her mother's eyes. "Sarah," Eden whispered, looking up at him. "We should call her Sarah." The suggestion caught him off guard. Love for this woman expanding impossibly further in his chest. "You'd do that? She'll need a strong name." Eden's smile was tired but radiant, a name that speaks of love and courage. "And," she hesitated, "I thought, for the cradle you're making her, you might add a rose carved next to her namesakes. Old love and new together." Silas bent to kiss them both, his wife, his daughter, his future shaped in flesh and blood. Outside, the storm was breaking, morning light painting the snow-covered world in shades of hope. "Rest now," he murmured, seeing Eden's exhaustion. "I'll finish the cradle today. Our girl needs a proper place to sleep." Eden was already drifting off, their daughter secure in her arms. Mrs. Miller shooed everyone from the room, but Silas lingered a moment longer, committing the scene to memory. The cradle would be finished by nightfall, he vowed. Cherrywood smooth as silk, twin roses carved with all the love in his heart, one for the woman who taught him to love, one for the woman who taught him to love again. The baby's first blanket, crafted from Sarah's old dress, lay soft and warm around little Sarah's sleeping form. Eden had found the dress in the attic, its faded blue calico still beautiful despite the years. Now transformed, it wrapped their daughter in an embrace that spanned generations of love. "She's so small," Silas whispered, watching their week-old daughter sleep in her newly finished cradle. The twin roses he'd carved, one for each Sarah, caught the firelight, throwing gentle shadows on the baby's face. But mighty, Eden smiled, thinking of their daughter's determined cries and surprisingly strong grip. "Doc Williams says she's gaining weight exactly as she should." She leaned back in the rocking chair, still tired from the difficult birth but growing stronger each day. Silas's hand found her shoulder, his touch conveying everything words couldn't. They'd had so many close calls that first night, moments when Eden's strength had faltered, when the baby's heartbeat had seemed too faint. Now each peaceful moment felt like a gift. "I never thought—" Silas's voice was rough with emotion. "After Sarah, my Sarah, died, I never thought I'd have this again. Family, hope." He knelt beside the chair, taking Eden's hand. "You've given me both." Eden's free hand traced the blanket's soft edge. "She gave us both a second chance, didn't she? This little one who refused to wait for spring." The baby stirred, making those small, snuffling sounds that never failed to draw them both closer. Her eyes opened, still blue, though Eden suspected they'd darken to match her own eventually. Tiny fingers flexed, reaching. "Someone's hungry," Eden observed, already moving to lift their daughter. The familiar ritual of nursing had become precious to her. These quiet moments of connection that reminded her how far she'd come from those desperate days in Boston. Silas brought her water, adjusted pillows, with the careful attention he'd shown since the birth. His tenderness still amazed her. This strong man, who could break wild horses but cradled their daughter like she was spun from gold. "Mrs. Miller says she's never seen a father so besotted," Eden teased gently. "Mrs. Miller talks too much." But his smile was proud as he watched them, though she did say something worth hearing yesterday. "Oh, said we should have a proper christening. Let the whole town meet little Sarah." He paused. "Let them see we're a real family, not just some convenient arrangement." Eden considered this as she burped their daughter. The town's attitude had shifted since the birth, sympathy and curiosity replacing most of the previous judgment. Even Reverend Matthews had visited, his blessing of their small family seemingly genuine. "It would be a statement," she said thoughtfully, "especially with father still making threats through his lawyers." Silas's jaw tightened at the mention of Harrison Blackwood's latest attempts to interfere. "Let him try something. The whole town saw how close we came to losing you both. They're on our side now." As if understanding the serious turn of conversation, little Sarah began to fuss. Eden rose carefully, moving to pace the familiar path between cradle and window. The baby blanket trailed over her shoulder as she hummed the lullaby that never failed to soothe their daughter. Silas watched them move through the firelit room, his expression soft with wonder. "You know what else?" Mrs. Miller said. Said she's never seen two people more meant to be parents. Said some folks spend years learning what you and I seem to know right away. Eden smiled, remembering her early fears about motherhood. "We had good teachers, didn't we? Your Sarah, my mother, before everything changed." She kissed their daughter's downy head. "Love knows love, I suppose." The baby was drifting. Off again, her small body growing heavy with sleep. Eden laid her gently in the cradle, tucking the transformed dress blanket around her. Silas's arms slipped around them both, and they stood together, watching their daughter dream. A christening, then, Eden decided. Let them all see what we've built here. Love, family, hope, everything your father thought he could buy or destroy. Everything worth fighting for, Silas agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Little Sarah sighed in her sleep, one tiny hand escaping the blanket to curl in the air. Eden tucked it back under the soft calico, marveling at how something as simple as an old dress could become so precious when transformed by love. Outside, winter still held the land in its grip, but in this room, spring was already blooming. Not the spring of their old lives, her father's manicured gardens, his first wife's carefully tended roses, but something wilder, stronger, more true. A love that had grown not in spite of life's storms, but because of them. The legal documents lay spread across the kitchen table like weapons: custody claims, mental health evaluations, bank notices. Harrison Blackwood's paper arsenal deployed with surgical precision. Eden held little Sarah closer, feeling her daughter's steady heartbeat against her chest as her father's words filled the room. "This can all go away, Eden." Harrison Blackwood hadn't changed, still immaculate in his Eastern suits, still wielding authority like a blade. "Sign the child over to the family's care, and we'll ensure she wants for nothing. The finest schools, the best opportunities." "The same opportunities you gave me?" Eden's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "To be bartered and controlled? To be protected from your own poor choices?" Her father's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Really, child? A rancher? A man who can barely keep his mortgage current?" He gestured at the bank notices. "Speaking of which, get out." Silas's quiet command from the doorway carried more authority than all her father's bluster. He'd come in from the barn at the sound of raised voices, and now stood like a storm about to break. Harrison barely spared him a glance. "Mr. McCrae, this is a family matter." "Exactly." Silas moved to stand beside Eden and their daughter. "My family, my wife, my child. A marriage of convenience won't protect you." James spoke up from beside their father, his lawyer's training evident in his smug tone. "We have documents proving Eden's mental instability during her pregnancy. Any court will void the marriage given the circumstances." Little Sarah stirred, perhaps sensing the tension. Eden soothed her automatically, the gesture drawing her father's attention to the child for the first time. "She looks like your mother," he said softly, something almost human crossing his face. "Give her the life she deserves, Eden. Not this." His wave encompassed the modest ranch house, the life she'd chosen. "She has the life she deserves." Eden stood, pride straightening her spine. "She has love, truth, a father who would die protecting her rather than use her as a pawn. What more could any child deserve?" "Don't be dramatic." Harrison's momentary humanity vanished. "James, show them the court order." Another document joined the arsenal on the table. "Temporary custody," James explained, almost gleeful, "pending a full hearing. But given Eden's documented instability and Mr. McCrae's financial situation, no." The word came from both Eden and Silas simultaneously. His hand found her shoulder. "Steady and strong. You don't have a choice." Harrison reached for the baby. "Come now, don't make this difficult." Several things happened at once. Little Sarah began to cry, not her usual fussy sounds, but real distress. Eden stepped back, shielding their daughter, and Silas. Silas moved. One moment Harrison Blackwood stood ready to take their child. The next, he was against the wall, Silas's forearm across his chest, all pretense of civility gone. Listen carefully. Silas's voice was deadly quiet. You came to my home, threatened my wife, tried to take my child. In Boston, maybe that's how things work. But out here, we protect our own. Unhand me this instant, Harrison spluttered, but fear had crept into his eyes. You're going to leave. Silas continued as if he hadn't spoken. Take your papers, your threats, your schemes. Go back east. Because if you ever come near my family again... He left the threat unfinished but unmistakable. James started forward, but Eden's voice stopped him. He means it, James, and so do I. Sarah is our daughter, not a Blackwood asset, not a piece in Father's games. If you pursue this, I'll tell every newspaper from here to Boston exactly why I fled. Every detail. Imagine what that would do to Father's precious reputation. Harrison's face went pale. Banking empires, Eden knew, were built on reputation. The scandal of his daughter's flight was one thing. The full story would be quite another. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Eden met his eyes, letting him see the truth there. I'm not your scared little girl anymore. I'm a mother, a wife. And I will burn your whole empire down before I let you harm my family. Silence fell, broken only by Sarah's quieting sniffles. Finally, Harrison straightened his coat, dignity warring with rage. You'll regret this. When this adventure in rural poverty grows tiresome, don't come crawling back. The only thing I regret, Eden said quietly, is not standing up to you sooner. They watched her father and brother leave, their expensive boots muddy, their legal weapons rendered useless by love's stronger claims. Only when the sound of horses faded did Eden's trembling begin. Silas gathered her and Sarah close, his arms a fortress around them. Their daughter, sensing the danger past, had fallen asleep, one tiny hand curled in her mother's shawl. It's over, Silas murmured against Eden's hair. Is it? She looked at the papers still scattered across their table. Those? Just paper. He pressed a kiss to their daughter's head, then Eden's. This is real, this is true, this is what's worth fighting for. Eden breathed in the scent of her family, hay and leather, milk and powder, love made manifest, and knew he was right. Let her father keep his empire of paper and schemes. She had something far more precious, a love strong enough to stand against any storm. The family portrait captured a moment of perfect peace. Eden in her best dress, little Sarah sleeping in her arms, Silas standing proud behind them. The photographer from town had insisted on formal poses, but at the last moment, Silas had looked down at his wife and daughter with such naked love that the resulting image told their true story better than any staged composition could have. It's not quite what Father would consider a proper family portrait, Eden mused, studying the finished photograph in the warm evening light. No elaborate backdrops or stiff poses here, just the three of them against the simple backdrop of their ranch house. Reality more beautiful than pretense. Good. Silas settled beside her on the porch swing, their daughter dozing in her cradle nearby. Spring had come early this year, painting the valley in shades of promise. Though I expect he'll see it soon enough. Eden raised an eyebrow. Oh? Posted. A copy to every bank and business associate of his from here to Boston. A hint of mischief played around Silas's mouth. Along with a notice that Sarah Rose McCrae was born to her legally wedded parents and is under the protection of every law in the territory. You didn't. But Eden's delighted laugh said she knew he had. What happened to the quiet rancher who barely spoke 2 words when he bought my contract? Met a woman who taught him some things were worth fighting for. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, worth speaking for. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no Eastern artist could capture. Little Sarah made those small, sleeping sounds that never failed to draw their attention, but didn't wake. I got a letter from my mother today, Eden said after a while. The first since everything. Silas's hand tightened on hers. What did she say? That she's proud of me. That she remembers what it's like to choose love over family expectations. She did the same once, marrying father when her parents opposed it. Eden's voice softened. She asked if she might visit, come summer, meet her granddaughter. What? Do you want? The question, simple, direct, putting her wishes first, reminded Eden again of how far she'd come from the controlled world of her childhood. I want Sarah to know at least one grandparent who sees her as more than a Blackwood. Heir, and... She hesitated. I want to show my mother the life I've chosen, show her I'm happy. Are you? Silas turned to face her fully. Happy? Even with all the struggles ahead? Eden thought of their mounting challenges. The mortgage still precarious, the ranch needing repairs, the hard work each day demanded. But then she thought of morning kisses that tasted of coffee, of Silas singing their daughter to sleep with off-key cowboy songs, of the quiet moments when they simply held each other. No words needed. I'm more than happy, she said softly. I'm home. Silas's hand came up to cup her cheek, his calloused palm familiar and precious against her skin. When Sarah, my first Sarah, died, I thought that was the end of love for me. Thought I'd live out my days with just memories and regrets for company. And now I wake each morning to our daughter's cries and your smile, and I realize something. His voice grew husky with emotion. Love doesn't end. It changes, grows, finds new ways to heal old wounds. What I felt for Sarah was real and true. But what I feel for you, Eden McCrae, is just as real, just as true, and entirely its own kind of miracle. Eden leaned into his touch, feeling tears gather. I never thought I'd find this. Growing up, love was always about conditions. Behave. This way, marry that person, maintain appearances. But this... She gestured to encompass their home, their sleeping daughter, their entwined lives. This is pure, true, like gold tested in fire, Silas agreed, referencing the Bible verse they'd chosen for their wedding. A particularly loud snuffle from Sarah made them both smile. Eden reached for the cradle, drawing it closer to the swing. Their daughter's peaceful face in sleep was poetry no Boston finishing school could have taught her to appreciate. I choose this, Eden whispered, echoing her words from that first confrontation with her father. Every day, every struggle, every joy. I choose you, Silas McCrae, you and our daughter, and this life we're building. And I choose you. He gathered, her close, careful not to disturb the baby. Always. The family portrait sat forgotten in Eden's lap as the evening deepened around them. But its image, that captured moment of love, overwhelming pretense, had already done its work. Somewhere, in Boston, Harrison Blackwood would soon see proof that some things couldn't be bought or controlled. That love, real love, could take root and flourish even in soil he'd considered too common for his daughter. The nightbirds began their evening songs, a symphony no concert hall could match. Eden settled deeper into Silas's embrace, feeling the rhythm of his heart against her cheek. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight was for this: family, love, and the quiet triumph of choosing one's own path. The ranch deed, newly drafted with both their names inscribed in careful legal script, lay on the kitchen table beside a letter from Harrison Blackwood's bank. The document that had once symbolized Silas's solitary struggle now testified to their shared triumph. Mr. and Mrs. Silas McCrae, joint proprietors. 1 year had changed so much. The spring morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that made Eden grateful for every choice that had led her here. Through the open window, she could hear Silas's voice carrying from the yard, singing to their daughter as he worked. Papa's girl wants to help with the horses. That's my Sarah. Their daughter's delighted giggle followed, the sound that had become the heartbeat of their home. At 11 months, little Sarah was already showing signs of both her parents' determination. She'd taken her first steps just last week, straight toward the barn where Silas was working, as if born knowing where she belonged. Eden moved to the doorway, drinking in the sight of them. Silas had Sarah perched securely on his hip, showing her how to offer an apple to Belle's newest foal. The baby's dark curls caught the sunlight, so like her father's, while her eyes, which had indeed darkened to match Eden's, sparkled with curiosity. The ranch itself bore witness to their year of shared labor. New fencing stretched across the south pasture, the barn roof had been repaired, and the kitchen garden Eden had planted flourished with both flowers and vegetables. Even the house seemed to stand straighter, as if pride in its transformation ran through its very bones. "Mama!" Sarah spotted her, reaching out with the imperious demand of the adored only child. "Mama, horse!" "I see, darling." Eden joined them, accepting her daughter's sticky kiss. "Teaching her early, I see. McCrae women have to know horses." Silas's free arm slipped around Eden's waist, drawing her close. "Isn't that right, Mrs. Miller?" Their neighbor emerged from the barn, carrying a basket of fresh eggs. She'd become a regular visitor, more grandmother than friend to little Sarah. "That and how to handle McCrae men," she winked, "though your Eden mastered that skill quickly enough." Eden laughed, remembering the frightened girl she'd been, standing on an auction block in the town square. "I had a good teacher," she said, squeezing Silas's hand. "Speaking of teaching," Mrs. Miller said, "Reverend Matthews asked me to remind you about the school board meeting. Says with your education, Eden, you'd be perfect to help with the older students come fall. The idea of teaching had been planted months ago when Eden helped young Tommy Hanson learn to read. The thought of sharing her love of learning, of helping shape young minds in this community that had become home, filled her with quiet joy. "I'll think about it," she promised, though they all knew she'd already decided. Mrs. Miller departed with her eggs, a knowing smile, leaving the family to their morning routine. Sarah was already squirming to get down, eager to toddle after the chickens that had become her particular fascination. "Careful now, little love," Silas called, watching their daughter's determined exploration. "She's fearless, this one. Like her father, like her mother," he corrected, pulling Eden closer, "who stood up to Boston bankers and social pressure to choose her own path." Eden thought of her mother's last visit, of the bridges slowly being rebuilt, of the way Sarah had immediately claimed her grandmother's heart. Some wounds, she'd learned, could heal if given enough time and love. "The deed came through," she said, nodding toward the house. "Your great-grandfather's legacy now officially ours to share." "Our legacy now." Silas's voice held pride and certainty. "For Sarah, and maybe—" He paused, a question in his eyes. Eden's hand drifted to her stomach, where their second miracle was just beginning to make itself known. Maybe for another McCrae to help work this land. His kiss was answer enough, tender and fierce at once. Sarah chose that moment to let out a triumphant crow, having successfully caught one of her beloved chickens. They turned to rescue both child and fowl, moving together with the easy synchronization of hearts long attuned. Above them, the Montana. Skies stretched endless and blue, while around them, the ranch that had once known only grief now burst with life and promise. Eden thought of that long-ago day when a broken wagon wheel had seemed an omen of disaster. Now she understood. Sometimes things had to break for love to find its way in, had to shatter so they could be rebuilt stronger than before. "Happy?" Silas asked softly. An echo of questions passed. Eden gathered their daughter close, feeling her husband's strength behind her, their future growing beneath her heart. The ranch deed might name them proprietors, but love had made them more, made them family, made them whole, made them home. "Beyond measure," she answered, and sealed the truth of it with a kiss.